In this worksheet, we need to put formulas into these highlighted cells that tabulate the percentages of the various quantities that we see here. For example, the descriptors in column A refer to different web seminar materials. Column B has the quantity. Now, we don't know necessarily if these are books or DVDs or what, but we've got 4,000 of these on hand, and they have to be distributed to our warehouses across the country. And we've decided for whatever reason that 20% of these need to go to the East, 25% to the Midwest, and so on. So writing a formula for one cell is pretty straightforward. Let's just, as we would typically do, start in the upper left corner and write a formula to calculate 20% of 4,000. Doesn't make any difference which of these we use first, but we're simply going to multiply the two. There we go. But as we think about copying this, thought probably occurs to us, we want our reference to C3 to remain unchanged. Because if we don't, what does this formula really do? It multiplies the cell above by the cell to its left. That's the standard relative reference that Excel uses. And again, just to prove that, we'll copy down here the formula. And what is this calculation? We don't have enough room to see it. We know that's not right. What's happening? It's 800 times 9,000. Obviously, that's not what we want. So one adjustment that we would make here would be, let's make our reference to C3 right here be absolute. And we can do that after changing this to 3 by simply pressing F4. There we go. Absolute reference, copy down here. And actually, we should have copied it upward too. It'll work just fine there. We're all set, right? But we also want to copy this to the right. And how does our formula read now? We're saying, by using the absolute reference here, that if we copy this formula to the right, it's going to always refer to C3. No matter where we copy it to, it will refer to C3. But we don't want it to refer to C3. We then want it to refer to D3 and E3 and F3. So the not so obvious solution, but once you see it, you will agree it works for sure, is the idea that sometimes we want some of our addresses to be partially absolute and partially relative, and the term mixed reference is what we typically use here. Now, imagine any one of these cells. Let's just pick one at random and answer the following question. Where do the percentages come from? Row 3. How about here? The percentages we need here, it's going to come out of row 3. Any of these. They're always going to come out of row 3. Where do the quantities come from? They always come out of column B. So let's go back to that original formula here and change it so that our reference here is always to row 3, but not necessarily to column C. In other words, we don't want the dollar sign in front of column C. Now you can manually remove these if you wish, but if you've clicked to highlight all of this address or click behind it or anywhere in here, simply press F4 a few times. You see what's happening. This toggles through the various variations here. We want the dollar sign in front of the 3. Every cell here in this group needs to get the percentages from row 3. Whatever follows the dollar sign is the portion of the address that's absolute. And so in the B4 portion of this, we want to press F4 repeatedly so that the dollar sign is in front of the B. There we go. That's our master formula. We can double click to copy it downward. We can copy this to the right. We're all set. So after copying the formulas, of course, and a lot of these we can do the math in our head, but let's just check out a few of them, maybe double click here. We see what the formula is. Of course it makes sense. And there is that dollar sign 3. There's that dollar sign B. Try this on another cell. Say this one, same general idea. We always see dollar signs in front of the reference to row 3. We always see dollar signs in front of the reference to column B. Now, if the numbers are a little different and we're dealing with certain kinds of items, and this is almost a non-Excel issue, but we might have to alter this. What if this is really 4,010? Are we going to get whole number answers here? We might not be seeing this. Perhaps some of these are decimals, so if these are DVDs, we can't quite cut them in half or anything like that. So probably an adjustment, and we can make this relatively quickly, would be to do rounding here. So we can select all of these at once, press F2, and simply introduce rounding right here. We would want to round these probably to the nearest whole number. Would probably be the best way to do this. So comma 0. And by pressing Control Enter, all of these will change at once. There they are. And it's good also to expose the decimals here, at least momentarily, so we can see that we don't have any decimal portions left. And again, we wouldn't ultimately need to show that, so go back or undo. So the idea of a mixed reference, although not nearly as commonly needed as an absolute reference, will be needed from time to time. And although not difficult, it does throw, as they say, it's kind of a monkey wrench into things. It takes a little bit of time to get used to this, and I would never call it intuitive, but it certainly works properly, and it's exactly what we need in situations like this, a mixed reference.